Welcome back, web slingers. In this installment, Mentors Part 2, we'll be going over some of the other heroes of the Marvel Universe. We'll start with Madam Web. There are two women that have gone by the name Madam Web, Cassandra Webb and Julia Carpenter. The latter was the second heroine to go by the name Spider-Woman, and both characters fill a role much like the Spider-Woman of Navajo legend, although much more ineptly. An old and blind mutant, the original Madam Web was a powerful psychic with precognition as well. She was paralyzed and had to remain strapped to a life support system. Having no trouble at all discovering Peter's secret identity in the 80s, she helped Spider-Man on several missions, and he protected her when the Juggernaut attempted to abduct her to be used against the X-Men. The old lady seemed to have no interest in Peter's civilian life, but in his heroic career she offered a number of tips on ongoing crimes that he would have missed otherwise. Madam Web quickly faded into obscurity, though resurging during and shortly after the Gathering of Five. She was more involved with a different Spider-Woman than a man. In the Brand New Day era, during a story called The Grim Hunt, which concluded the Gauntlet, Madam Web and Mattie Franklin, the third Spider-Woman, were killed. Web's powers were transferred to the somewhat more mobile Julia Carpenter. Julia's new abilities have been given a lot more spotlight than her predecessor. She has guided Peter in the time leading up to Spider Island, directing Shang-Chi to help him develop his own unique fighting style, the Way of the Spider. While her predecessor seemed to be your basic precog, Julia's new abilities seem to have grafted onto her prior Spider nature. She is aware of everyone's position in the web of life, particularly Peter's crucial role in the center. At the end of Spider Island, she is aware that a great threat has yet to come. She suggests that Peter use the cure for the spider virus he had used to cure the city on himself. For what he did that day, fate had given him a chance to walk away from his life and responsibilities as Spider-Man, with no consequences. The web will reweave with a new center, perhaps Arena or Kane, and everything will be fine. Peter declines, and Madam Web tells him that the loss she was sorry for was yet to come, at which point Peter expresses his frustration at how maddeningly vague and unhelpful she is. Something very bad was going to happen to him because he had declined. We later see her comforting Peter after Silver Sable is drowned off panel, assuring him that she was still alive, before she is later overloaded with visions of the future and enters a coma. While many assumed this great loss was a prediction of Superior Spider-Man, in Superior she wakes up long enough to mutter all spiders will die, the first hint of the Spider-Verse event. While she is perhaps justifiably criticized as the most useless telepath ever, Madam Web has demonstrated herself so far as a mentor figure with some real potential. Of course, there are other characters that have shown Spider-Man a thing or two about being a hero, and one of the best examples is Ezekiel. Of all Spider-Man's mentors, Ezekiel has a spot locked for second best, but of course that comes as no surprise. His creator, J.M.S., tried to place as many monomythic elements into his run as possible, and he chose to introduce the mentor right at the beginning. There are two things that make Ezekiel such a good mentor. One is that he has much wisdom to offer. He knows a lot about the more primal, animalistic side of the multiverse, and is thus a reliable guide to the hero, as he must venture outside of his comfort zone in order to survive. He was also good because, like many characters, he represented what the hero could have been. Unlike Peter, Ezekiel's powers were not accidental. He received them in a strange ritual. But while Peter accepted the call to adventure, Ezekiel refused, putting off for far too long. Ezekiel made use of his expertise to establish multi-billion-dollar business interests, and was denied nothing in life. However, he knew that his powers are meant for loftier things, that with great power comes great responsibility, if not specifically in those words. And he felt somewhat guilty about it. There is almost always a price one pays when they refuse the call. When Ezekiel found out that Spider-Man existed, he hired a number of private investigators, each retrieving a piece of the puzzle of his identity, without being aware of the whole picture. Years afterward, Ezekiel warned him about the coming of Morlun and the possible totemic nature of his powers. Essentially, most of his villains are animal-themed for a reason, because the hero is defined by his villains, and they are subconsciously drawn towards them. Ezekiel had built a vault to shield people like them from Morlun's senses. Peter was stubborn, and as a result was touched by the Morlun. Now there was nowhere to hide. The hero returned to the mentor, and they had a conversation and offered the latter a change of heart. What happened to, we have similar powers, but I'm getting old and I want to do one last good thing with my life? I made an offer. You declined. Okay, I get that part. I'm past that. You know what I'm up against. How about a helping hand? I can't. You're the main target, the one whom he can most fully feed on. The purer the source, the more he can absorb. But I'm close enough to be a pretty decent appetizer. That's why I've been careful to avoid him. So far, I don't think he even knows I exist. I can't risk exposing myself to him. Not even for you. Then at least give me something I can use. I've never asked for much. Like everyone else, I know the odds are always against us. That's just the way the universe works. I don't want guarantees, promises, assurances, or false hopes. All I've ever asked for is one chance to try, to stand on my own feet, and to give it my best shot. Succeed or fail, live or die. If I know I tried, then I can accept whatever happens. I'm sorry, Pete. I have more money than I ever wanted. I can buy you anything you want, but I can't give you this. I don't know any way to stop Moreland, let alone beat him. You're on your own. Well, it won't be the first time. Goodbye, Ezekiel. As Spider-Man reached the limit of his endurance, Ezekiel came to his aid, saving his life and seemingly dying in the attempt. He later started a program looking after children on the streets, which let Parker think about what he ever did in regards to criminals and supervillains after apprehending them. Ezekiel transported him to an African spider temple when he was being hunted down by Shathra, and without his mentee's knowledge, offered some of his blood to the thousands of spiders within, which presumably allowed Spider-Man to command an army of the Arachnids himself. In this period, he taught Spider-Man how to find balance in combat, to be the spider, but be smart about it, a true Spider-Man. Ultimately, however, the Mentor came to believe that there wasn't enough room for the two of them in the natural order, and in his cowardice, he turned on his protege before changing his mind and sacrificing himself. Ezekiel provided just the kind of mythic kickstart the franchise needed after the disastrous Mackie Byrne relaunch. Who knows how much Spider-Man could have accomplished if JMS had been allowed to continue this direction, instead of forced to write tie-ins, events, commercial stunts, and, of course, co-author One More Day. In addition to these prior examples, there are, of course, a couple other heroes that received honorable mention for directly aiding or instructing Spider-Man at one time or another. Wolverine was able to tell his secret identity by smell on their very first meeting, and they teamed up to find Ed Lee's killer in Germany and on a number of other occasions. I'd say the two developed a strong bond of friendship, especially since anyone else who joked like Spider-Man would probably be decapitated by now. Wolverine's role as a mentor is pretty small, but he was able to shed some light on Peter's past. As he was a friend of Peter's parents, he was present at the time his mother announced her pregnancy. He was the one who let him know once and for all that Pity was not his long-lost sister. Another figure is Daredevil. As fellow New York street heroes, Peter and Matt have teamed up many times, as far back as when he was still in high school. The two have an older-younger brother dynamic, and a mutual hatred for the Kingpin. In the death of Jean DeWolf, we see Peter so frustrated and mad at the Sin Eater because of Stan Carter's murders and his inability to stop him, and sometimes accidentally causing them by dodging bullets in crowded areas, that he seriously considers going over the line and killing the villain. It's Matt that keeps him from losing the pure noble heart we all love. Another great example was when Spider-Man was fighting the Maggia criminal organization, when their leader temporarily blinded him, frustrated at the possibility of being blind for life, not to mention the loss of function and possible spoiling of identity in civilian life. Peter was rather useless, dangerous even. Even though Peter was ignorant of his fellow hero's blindness and what he had to go through every day, the lawyer vigilante helped him fight the criminals and found him a good optometrist. Shortly before the story ended, Peter's spider sense was very briefly enhanced by a variation of Daredevil's radar sense. This went away when he recovered his sight. Shang-Chi is another example. We don't get an awful lot of information on their partnership, as it lasts for only one issue, but he trains him in combat for a number of weeks before Spider Island. I am no fan of the mystical. Peter did receive supernatural aid from Doctor Strange on several occasions during JMS's run. First teaming up against a villain that was pulling children out of their dimension, Doctor Strange told him to not deviate from his mission. But Peter saw his wife while in astral form, but undetectable to human senses. He was unable to interact with her. Shortly afterwards, Strange got himself involved in the totemic era of Peter's life. He contacted him and told him that because of his prior excursion, his totemic presence had been picked up by something dangerous. Opening his biology book to the page Strange had suggested, Peter found a description of a spider wasp, and a living embodiment of this natural predator, Shathra, entered his dimension. Strange then guided Peter as he was lost when many of Marvel's heroes were finding Dormammu. In Amazing Spider-Man number 500, an issue that mirrored number 100, Peter followed Strange's voice through a gauntlet of past experiences, a seeming lifetime of battles, tragedies, and a future that may or may not come to pass. It was Peter's birthday, and after the business was over, Strange found a mysterious box in his pocket and gave it to Peter. The gift offered the hero 5 minutes to speak with his deceased uncle before settling for the night with his living family. Now their paths had crossed before in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man during a 1970s story with Flash and Shazam, and they did cross paths later during OMD and Omit. But the earlier story was a generic team-up, and the latter two were stories where Spider-Man was made into a pathetic kid wearing down Strange and many other major figures in the Marvel Universe into helping him, and them all being incompetent morons in everything that didn't serve editorial interests. Captain America has served as an infrequent mentor for much of Spider-Man's history. Like every superhero in the Marvel Universe, Peter idolizes Captain America because he's, well, Captain America, and Spider-Man is in the esteemed position of being the only superhero Cap idolizes. Steve Rogers admires Spider-Man's perseverance amidst all of Jameson's campaigns. It's one of the things that really kept him going in the modern world after being thawed out of the ice. They would have occasional interchanges, team-ups, favors, and like, but their relationship didn't really become that important until the Civil War. At first, Peter sided with Iron Man's pro-registration camp and unmasked. This didn't really make any sense, but let's just roll with it anyway. He opposed Captain America's anti-registration side for a while, and then his principles and the shady things the registration forces were doing made him switch to Cap's side. Like the first Avenger, Peter's morality had mostly been rooted in deontological principles, which he had betrayed previously by siding with Iron Man's utilitarian camp, and their attitude of the ends justify the means. Though life was really harsh as a fugitive, Peter was right where he belonged, standing for something he had more than enough life experience to believe in. For once, as Marvel put it, the heart, Spider-Man, and soul, Captain America, of Marvel were united. But alas, it was not to be for long. Cap was arrested and seemingly assassinated. Spider-Man remained a fugitive. Conveniently for Marvel editorial, his fugitive status remained even after amnesty was granted to all the anti-reg forces, a contributing factor to them getting the status quo they wanted to force. And then came the utter character assassination that gave us Brand New Day. In the Ultimate Universe, Peter's relationship as Cap's student was even worse. Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor were supposed to train him to become an Avenger when he grew up. Cap thought he was way too young and inexperienced. He had come to the conclusion, crazy enough, that Spider-Man didn't care an awful lot about the civilians, although I suppose property damage is an issue with many heroes. When Spider-Man finally got a training session with Rogers, he showed him a cemetery and told him that it appeared as if he had never contemplated death, specifically his own demise, when it came to his heroic duties. He questioned his hero status, how he performed, and what he was going to do. Of course, the Ultimate Captain mournfully ate crow first Spider-Man saved Cap's life by taking a bullet for him. Then, rather than go to the hospital, fought the Sinister Six to protect his family, only to die victorious on his front lawn at the age of 16 in the very same story. Yeah, Ultimate Pete thought plenty about his own mortality throughout the death of Spider-Man, but I don't think his mentor really made a great contribution in this case. While the concept was popularized in recent years by several MCU films, where it was admittedly handled a lot better, of all the heroes of Marvel that could mentor Spider-Man, there are few choices that could be as bad as Iron Man. Sure, Peter greatly admired his scientific genius, but Tony doesn't have anything to offer Spider-Man in that kind of relationship, besides money. And what did that $2 million donation accomplish exactly? Tony gave him the Iron Spider suit, which was an outstanding piece of tech, but it was more a matter of turning Spider-Man into Iron Man Jr., or at least assuming that everyone would benefit from his suits, than a gee, Tony, I really needed that thing. Spider-Man is really smart, sufficiently so to neutralize Iron Man's suits in a fight. He's also built his own exoskeletons in the past, the Anti-6 suit, and specialized costume for stealth, electricity-proof, or bulletproof, depending on the circumstances. The reason why Peter didn't go running around calling himself the Iron Spider on his own was because his life didn't depend on crutches, since he was a hero with powers. While Tony undoubtedly cares, and did a number of things to help Peter, ultimately he used him to serve as his political poster boy in the Civil War. Then didn't do anything about his fugitive status when he defected to Captain America's side. And after the war ended in one more day, when Peter tries to convince him to help with his aunt in the hospital, Tony declines to do so in person because he fears being seen with a fugitive, even though he was the one who made him a fugitive, and the whole fugitive context running in One More Day was ridiculous, given continuity. Ultimate Universe Tony is not a bad or selfish mentor. He just doesn't have a clue what he's doing. While Ultimate Tony likes Spider-Man and admires his courage and intellect, that desire to make a mini-me is just as clear. In the Ultimate Universe, Iron Man's mentoring of Spider-Man at the behest of S.H.I.E.L.D. amounted to him asking Spider-Man to punch him, Spider-Man commenting on Stark not having any idea what to do, and then the two becoming distracted by an explosion and dealing with Mysterio. Ultimately, what makes it fail, however, is that they are too different. Peter was raised in a blue-collar family. While Stark has sometimes seen poverty, he came from a wealthy family and has been a billionaire for most of his career. Peter's life is molded by a keen and often obsessive sense of responsibility. While Stark knows how to run a company and does an admirable job of looking after his employees, he is still a playboy and quite reckless with his own life. Finally, while Spider-Man's ethics are primarily deontological, Iron Man is a utilitarian. While he has a lot of experience dealing with deontologists like Cap, his guidance shows little to no respect for what Spider-Man has endured. Actually, that would be a mistake. He appreciates what Peter's endured and suggests he unmask anyway, precisely to make an example of him, because he's a hero that's guarded so closely and suffered so much when people know his identity and then bring him into a cause that's against his principles, and see him going against like-minded friends. Sure, the Nazi-like characterization Iron Man Civil War era was off, but in regards to his dealing with Spider-Man, it's not that off, making Tony Stark the single worst non-villainous of Parker's mentors. That's about the extent of Spider-Man's mentors in his publication history. However, in Part 3, we'll be going over the hero as a mentor and see his experiences as a teacher in several continuities. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can donate if you are so inclined. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments and any requests you may have for future videos. Until then, Excelsior! Swinging from the highest ranch, Khalifa by my head.